Okay, this video is going to show you how to make fresh pasta. So I have 100 grams of strong plain flour in a bowl, and I have 2 eggs, but at the moment I'm just going to use one of my eggs because it does depend on your flour whether or not you need more than 1 egg. Sometimes the flour takes a little bit more, sometimes it doesn't need quite as much. So rather than breaking both eggs to start with and not using all the egg, I'm just going to start by putting 1 egg into the bowl. So I'm going to just add all of that beaten egg into my bowl and stir with a knife to start mixing it together. Your pasta dough needs to be quite soft. Don't really want it to be too sticky, but it does need to be soft enough to hold together. If it's too dry, it will just crumble as you try to roll it, and you won't find it very easy to put it through a pasta machine. So having started that mixing together, I'm just going to put my hands in and see if I can get all of that into one dough. Now, the eggs that I have at home are large eggs, but that's still not quite going to go together. So I'm going to need to add a little bit more egg to my bowl. I'm just going to wash my hands quickly. So having got clean hands, I am going to have to break the second egg and add a little bit more egg to that mixture. Now this time I'm not going to put the whole egg in because I don't want this to be too wet. However, I do want some of the egg to go in. So again, I'm going to start with the knife, trying to keep my hands as clean as possible for as long as possible. But you will have to put your hands in and knead this dough to get it nice and smooth. So that is going together now. So that is one ball of dough, but I can feel that it is a little bit lumpy. So I'm going to put a little bit of flour on the worktop and just knead my pasta dough until it goes smooth. So same as you've done kneading before, take the mixture from the outside into the middle, push away from you until I end up with a nice smooth pasta dough. And you need to take a little bit of time on this. This is now a little bit sticky, but you need to take a little bit of time on this and make sure that your dough is smooth before it goes into the fridge. When it goes through the pasta machine or you roll it out by hand, you are going to be stretching this dough. So we need the gluten to develop. And I just need, or we just need, a nice smooth pasta dough. And that looks a lot better now. That looks a lot more even on the top. So this dough, I'm just going to cover it in cling film and pop that into the fridge for 20 minutes whilst I make the bolognese for a lasagna. Right, for your lasagna you need to make your meat sauce. So for this I've got a can of tomatoes, some basil, onion, garlic, half a beef stock cube, pepper and minced beef. So the first thing that I'm going to do is prepare my vegetables. So the onion in half, cutting through your fingers, remember, using bridge hold, and having a plate or a bowl or a piece of kitchen towel to put your rubbish on to keep your work area clean. Take off, it's easier to get rid of the skin once you've cut this in half, so just take off all the brown outside layers, any dry layers of onion that you're not going to want to eat, and leave on the root and the shoot end of your onion. If you take off one of these, and it doesn't matter which end you take off, it does make your onion easier to chop. So, bridge hold again, through your fingers, cut down but not quite to the end of your onion. So don't cut all the way through to start with. Make sure that you leave the onion connected, and if you've left all your onion connected, you should be able to pick it up and hold it by that end. You can then turn that around, swap from bridge hold to claw grip. I'm just going to turn this way so that you can see a bit more easily, and cut across the onion so that you have nice fine dice of onion. You do not need to go all the way to the end. You can stop before the end and just put the other end of the onion out of the way. So all of your onion needs to be finely chopped, and you also need to do your garlic. And the easiest way to peel your garlic is to put it on your board and crush it, which loosens the skin from the garlic, and you can then easily get rid of that into your waste. Your garlic, if you've got a garlic crusher, you can crush it. If you don't have a garlic crusher, you will need again to use bridge hold and finely chop your garlic, or at least roughly chop your garlic. Large bits of garlic are not always good in your food, so chopping the garlic up, and I will roughly chop that a little bit more when I do the other half of the onion in a moment. And the pepper. So half a pepper is all that you need, and if you cut your pepper in half and then get hold of the core here, it makes it quite easy to just pull that out into the rubbish. And I am then going to slice through, so get this into slices to start with, and then I'm just going to put the slices together and chop to get small pieces of pepper for this meat sauce. I don't want them to be too big because I want them to cook through quite quickly in the meat sauce. In the saucepan I've got my minced beef, the garlic and the onion. I haven't added any oil to this because there is no need. As the meat browns and starts to cook, it's going to release some of its fat. So all you need to do is break up your mince, and then as it's cooking, keep stirring until all your mince is browned and your onion has gone from being very white, as it is at the moment, to being nice and translucent or clear. So just keep stirring on the heat, and as the meat starts to cook, you will release some of the fat and the juices from it, and that will stop your meat from sticking. The The mince is starting to cook now, it's starting to brown, so bits of it are brown, but you need to keep moving it so that it all breaks up. But you can also see around the edge of the pan that there is definitely fat coming out from the mince, which is why it's not sticking. So keep going. When it's like this, it's not enough. You don't want to see any red, and your onion needs to change colour. The meat's all browned now. Can't see any more pink meat in there, but the onion isn't cooked yet. So before I add any more ingredients to this, I just want to finish cooking the onion through. So I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit, pop the lid on that saucepan and just leave that to cook for 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, the meat and onions have cooked for a couple of minutes, and you can see the onion has changed colour. It's nowhere near as white as it was when it started. It's quite a lot more translucent and pale. So I need to add the other ingredients into here. So I have a can of chopped tomatoes, which I'm going to put in. I have about a teaspoonful of basil. I've got a beef stock cube, which I'm just going to break up and crumble on the top. I'm actually putting in just half a beef stock cube. That's personal preference. I don't want the full beef stock cube in there. And lastly, I have the red pepper that I chopped up previously. So all of my ingredients are in. Give this a good stir, and then you need to bring this up to the boil. So your heat needs to come up again to bring it up to the boil, and then turn it down so that it can simmer and the meat can cook through. This doesn't want to be too wet a mixture, but you do need to keep an eye on it and make sure that it's not going to burn and boil dry. So once this is boiling, I am going to reduce the heat, get it down to a simmer, put the saucepan lid back on, and then that's going to cook for about 20 to 25 minutes while I finish off and make the sauce for the lasagna and roll my pasta out. I've taken my pasta out of the fridge, just given it a quick knead to soften it up in a little bit of flour because I don't want it to be too wet. I have the pasta machine ready, clamped to the worktop and set up, and I've made sure that the rollers to start off with are on the widest setting. I've got a knife to cut my pasta with, my fresh pasta, in case it gets too long, and I've got an area of worktop with flour on, ready to put the pasta on. So for your rolling of your fresh pasta in a pasta machine, I'm just coating this in a little bit of flour. What you need to do on the widest setting is take your pasta through the machine, and the first time that it goes through on the widest setting, it doesn't come out particularly easily. So what you need to do is fold it into 3. I am just going to dust this in a little bit of flour because it's still a little bit sticky, and then I'm going to put it through again on the same setting just to help break down the pasta and get it nice and smooth. I'm going to fold that into 3 again, just put a little bit of flour on either side. And this is the last time that I am going to put the pasta through on this setting. And if you're doing this on your own, one hand on the top of the machine turning the handle and one holding onto the pasta. So now I've done that once on that setting, I'm just going to take the rollers down by 1 notch and put the pasta through again. So this becomes a bit more tricky if it's just you, because you need to be feeding the pasta through with one hand and catching it with the other. But you can see the pasta is getting longer and thinner, and as it works I don't need to add any more flour to it. I'm not going to do it again on that setting. What I'm going to do is start feeding the pasta through again, and I've taken it down one more, so it is one less notch. I'm going to drop the pasta over the back of the machine and just help feed it through at the front, and you can see it's getting quite a bit longer. It's almost the depth of my worktop already. Again, down one. Pasta goes through, and you keep feeding your pasta through until you get to the thinnest setting. If your pasta becomes too long and you think it's becoming unmanageable for you to cope with, then just cut it in half so that you're working on a smaller piece of pasta. I've only got a couple more settings on this to do. Didn't click in properly, click in there. So I've only got 2 more settings on the rollers on this machine. So this is 1, and then this is going to be my last feeding through, and you can see hopefully how thin your pasta gets with the pasta machine. If you don't have a pasta machine, you can roll by hand. That's perfectly acceptable, and lots of people do roll by hands. There are lots of people who think putting pasta through a pasta machine is actually cheating, but this last rolling of the pasta is really thin, and what you need to do is just put that down on your worktop, trying not to fold it over. You can cut it into smaller pieces. I'm just going to dust the top a little bit, and then the pasta is ready to turn into lasagna in a moment, and all I've got to do is go back a couple of notches and finish the second piece. Okay, the next thing that I need to do for the lasagna is to make my white sauce to go on the top and in between the layers. So in the saucepan I have 25 grams of butter, which I am melting. You can use butter or margarine, it really doesn't matter. And I am going to just stir this with a whisk. This is a roux sauce, and it's quite easy to make these lumpy, so you need to focus while you are making this, especially on the liquid. If you have your heat too high, it's very easy to burn either the butter or the roux, and then you will have to start again. So just melt your 25 grams of butter, and as soon as that is melted, you can add in 25 grams of plain flour. A roux sauce is always based on an equal amount of fat and flour cooked together to form the thickening of the sauce. So that is just about melted. So I can tip in my 25 grams of flour. When you add the flour, you need to stir this, and you should get a nice thick paste. So you do need to keep stirring this on the heat. If you walk off and leave this, it's very easy to brown this, and we want a white roux sauce. So we don't want the flour to be cooked and change colour, but we do want to start cooking it a little bit just before we add any flour. So what you have in your pan is a thick paste. I've often heard students say it looks a bit like runny mashed potato. You've got to get all of the milk into this, so you need to add your milk slowly, and this is where lots of people make a mistake on this sauce, and they add the liquid too quickly. Every time you add a bit of liquid to this pan, you need to get this sauce to one consistency again. So it doesn't matter what it looks like as long as it is one consistency. And if you add your milk too quickly, you will get lumps. If you don't get your sauce back to one consistency, you can also get lumps. So if I were to look at this now and decide that I wanted to add some more milk, the chances are that when that was done, I would have a very lumpy sauce because it was not one consistency to start. So again, one consistency, nice and smooth, even though it's thick, and you can add a little bit more of your milk. And I have 375 mils of milk here for this particular amount of sauce. And again, it's just a question of being patient, because if you look at that at the moment, it looks as if it is going lumpy. But if you continue to whisk, there we go, and don't add any more milk, you can beat out or whisk out all of those lumps and get a nice smooth consistency again. So you keep going, adding all of your milk a little at a time until all of your milk has been added to this pan. Once you've added all the milk, you need to then bring the sauce up to the boil and allow the flour to cook out for just a couple of minutes. And you will need to keep stirring while that flour cooks out. Now that is actually starting to look a bit more like a sauce. It still looks like a thick sauce at the moment, so I'm going to add one more portion of milk to this, and then what I'm going to do when I've got this nice and smooth this time, I'm going to add all the remaining milk because it's actually looking like a sauce. And provided I keep whisking this, there we go, and it's all one consistency again, I can now add the rest of my milk all in one go, turn the heat up and bring this up to the boil. And what you're hoping for is that you've got a smooth sauce when this is boiling. It must boil. Once it's boiled, it will not get any thicker, but you do need to get it up to the boil. So at the moment it's looking really thin. When it's boiled, this will have thickened up again. This sauce is just coming up to the boil, so it's just starting to boil, and it's lovely and smooth, which is what you want for your sauce, any sauce that you make. So I'm just going to cook the flour out on a gentle heat for a couple of minutes, and then everything should be ready to assemble for making the lasagna. I have the meat sauce cooked for the lasagna, I have the lasagna sheets on the worktop, I've cooked out my sauce just for a couple of minutes, and I'm just going to add 3/4 of my cheese to this sauce off the heat. You don't need to do this on the heat because the residual heat from making your sauce is plenty to melt that cheese. I've tasted the meat sauce and I've adjusted that so that it tastes the way that I want it to, and you do also need to try your cheese sauce with a clean teaspoon and just see if it needs any salt or pepper, which we haven't put in yet because there is quite a lot of salt in cheese. And I'd actually like some black pepper in that, I think. So a little bit of black pepper in there. I'm just going to give that another quick stir, and then you can assemble your lasagna. So I'm doing this in 2 small bowls, 2 small dishes rather than one large one. So I'm just going to put a layer of lasagna in the bottom of one, just to show you. So not lasagna, a layer of the meat sauce in the bottom of one, and then I need to top that with the lasagna. So this lasagna is too long for that dish, but if I cut it like that, with any luck, I'll have a piece which will just about fit in that dish, and luckily it's just wide enough. Because this is quite a lot of sauce, I'm going to add a layer of sauce on the top before I put any meat in there. It is up to you if you wish to put a layer of the cheese sauce in the middle of your meat and pasta layers. Some people like it that way, others prefer just to have the sauce on the top. And because of the size of these dishes, I'm just going to do 2 layers. So I'm just going to put another layer of meat, another layer of lasagna, and then the cheese sauce on the top. I've finished layering up the lasagnas, finished off on the top with a bit of the cheese sauce, and I'm just going to sprinkle some of the remaining cheese on the top to help this brown off in the oven. Because this is fresh pasta, so it's already quite soft, it doesn't take as long to cook as the dried lasagna. So I'm just going to pop these in the oven for roughly 30 minutes on gas mark 4, 160 degrees. Just remember to make sure that you do put your lasagnas on a baking tray before they go into the oven to make them easier to get out. And that is your finished lasagna, made with fresh pasta.